Okay, hi Professor Grace. This is my submission for the Brand Trust in-class assignment. I hope you're having a great time watching the eclipse with your kids. Sounds super fun. Okay, so the first question was, are there any businesses or brands that you personally trust, and why do you trust them? So personally, I really trust the brand Hyundai because I drive a Hyundai, and my family has owned my car for about going on 4 or 5 years now, and I've had very little problems with it. And the few times I've had problems with my car, they're just a brand that is super accessible and reliable, and every single customer service or representative I've ever talked to about them have been incredibly helpful. Or if there ever was an issue with my car that like finances needed to become a part of it, they were very easy to work with and very manageable. And yeah, it's just a really great day. It was really nice to have a company that both has a really great product, such as my car, but then also has a really great team and customer service and soft skills to back them up. So that's what I think is really important in brands, and that brands I personally trust. So the second question was, when do brands build trust with consumers? So I think brands build trust with consumers when they are reliable, accessible, transparent, and have a good product to back them up, as I was saying earlier with Hyundai. So I think brands build trust when they not only have a good product, but they also have a really good team. For example, going back to the upskill assignment we focused on a few weeks ago about like the Tony's Chocolonely, I think that was a really good product that had build trust with consumers because they were incredibly transparent, both with their ingredients and their mission and everything from the product design to that sort of thing. But they also had a really good product to back them up, like really good chocolate bars. So I think that's really good because if you have a really great team but a bad product, consumers aren't going to buy the product. But if you have a really good product and a bad team, consumers aren't going to buy the product. So I think you need a really good mix of both in order to build that trust with consumers. So the third question was, when do brands lose trust with consumers? So I think brands lose trust with consumers when they lie about certain aspects of their product or have a really bad team to back them up and their product up. For example, a few years ago, I remember a lot of hair care companies came under fire because it turned out that they had silicone and bad stuff in their shampoo and conditioners that was causing harm to customers. Another example is like the Old Spice deodorants, like had stuff in their deodorant that was giving customers like really bad skin reactions, even though it said in their like ingredients or like these shampoos that like it had inverse effects, or they didn't really highlight how those products didn't do their mission or didn't do what consumers needed them to do that was labeled. And so a lot of consumers switched to other products, and it kind of became irreparable damage for that brand. And I was impacted by this. Like, for example, I had to switch shampoo and conditioners because I didn't want these silicones and bad products in my shampoos and conditioners anymore. So I think that really is a way brands can break trust with their customers, is like stuff through that. And like they can lose a lot of business through that. And I think they can also lose trust through having like a really bad team. Like, for example, if you have a great product but it's really hard to get in touch with someone from customer service, or really hard like accessibility. I know that's a huge issue in like banking, and like a lot of my finance classes right now we're talking about is like the customer service side of things. So I think that's super interesting. And like if you have a great product but you don't have great people, it's really hard for consumers to like kind of follow that product compared to competitors. So the last question for the first part was, how does trust impact relationships? So I think trust impacts relationships both in business and broader in like personal and professional life, because in order for there to be trust, there needs to be vulnerability, and one party needs to be giving the other party like a piece of them and kind of like entrusting quite literally them to either complete a product or service or like hold valuable information. I think that's why it's so important for like laws like HIPAA and education laws and FERPA to be in place, because it's that privacy aspect. But then also for brands, there needs to be trust. If I'm entrusting that a brand is going to do something for my skin, or do something for cleaning my clothes, or doing something for whatever, then if that brand breaks that trust, it's going to be really hard for the consumer to then go back and retrust that brand. So I think that's why it's so important, both in personal and professional and business relationships. So the second part of the assignment was to reflect on the report's finding about innovation in society and think about what this means for growing use of AI in business, marketing, college, and life in general. So I thought this was like an incredibly interesting topic because AI is so incredibly prevalent right now, both in like personal and professional careers, and especially within education right now. So I think like the data and compliance within marketing is really interesting. And when I first like read over the report, I kind of thought about the quote from Spider-Man, like, with great power comes great responsibility. That truly, like, it sounds silly, but I really think that is with AI, and like it is such an incredible tool to use, but it also has the power to like replace jobs, and like if used wrong can be bad, if that makes sense. So for the first part, I think innovation in this field is really interesting because we already live in a culture that is kind of really hostile with news and politics. For example, on slide 9 of the report, 64% of journalists and 61% of business leaders have been caught trying to mislead people by saying that information or news are false or true, or trying to like twist the story to support their cause. And just going back the last 5 years, looking at news sources, looking at like the biases within that, that's really hard and interesting. It has really contributed to, I think, a lot of like the political state of America and kind of like that more hostile aspect. So when you bring AI, which is like technology driven and can be like, it really is the ethics of whoever is writing that code for the AI to like say which opinion they want them to form. It's really hard to be like completely unbiased. I think that's really interesting, and like the innovation of getting consumers, because we've already lived in a society where they're kind of lied to in the news sometimes. And I think it's also really interesting with innovation because AI is completely online and tech driven. And on slide 29 of the report, 59% of surveyors said they get the most information from online searches. So I think having a really accessible and transparent AI and like data sourcing is super important to like kind of drive, to like kind of convert consumers in the marketing funnel, and also in the innovation side of things to like get them to like start trusting and being for AI if it's a lot more transparent and accessible, because that's where our consumers are getting most of their information from. So as I was saying earlier, for a business to be trusted, it needs to be accessible and transparent. Those are like two big pillars, both of my personal values and like what I want to be as a business leader one day. So in terms of innovation, how AI is impacted by it, I think a lot more can be done for introducing and both limiting AI in both business and education. Like, for example, on slide 20 of the report, the United States was the leading country in terms of people not trusting management and innovation, with 58% of consumers saying that innovation is poorly managed within our society. And I personally cannot agree more sometimes. I think with a lot of AI, the excitement has been overshadowed by the aspect of jobs being replaced, or completely fields like marketing or writing or the whole actor SAG strike, like complete jobs and fields being eroded by AI, which in one hand makes sense, but also when you instill that fear in people, that really drives them to be hostile and against something. So, and then again on slide 21, 43% of responses said that AI is being managed poorly. And I can really see, going back to that hostile aspect, where people are getting that sort of fear from. So knowing that now, restoring trust in the process of like management, and also bringing AI into like converting people in the marketing funnel to be more for and not against AI, I think that there's really interesting ways to kind of get that. On slide 37, the report listed 4 ways that businesses can respite or regain consumer trust. And 2 really key highlights and citations from that I think are: A, businesses must partner for change, which is so incredible because businesses is most trusted to introduce innovation to society, with emphasis on partnering like with the government or with consumers. So like, for example, I think if companies who use AI came out and said, we don't really want to replace jobs, we just want to make people's lives easier in that sort of sense, I think a lot of consumers would be more for that company and for introducing AI in that sphere, which makes sense. Like if companies such as Netflix or the film industry came out and said, we're not having AI replace these jobs, I think a lot more actors and writers and people within that industry would be a lot more for using AI within that sphere and space. So yeah. And also it said that CEOs need to safeguard jobs and take a stand on emerging ethical concerns. Yeah, I agree. I think that's really interesting. And I think if more CEOs and leaders of that company didn't necessarily hide behind like the AI and the allegations, but then rather came out and said, we're going to do steps A, B, and C to protect these people and protect these jobs, but also partner with AI, that's where I think it's going to be really good, instead of polarizing the issue, uniting the issue. And for my last point, another site from this slide said that scientists can also do more for the forefront of AI. And I thought this was a really interesting feature because when I think of scientists, I think of like a chemist or a biologist or someone who's like physically doing tangible science. And when you think about AI, it's all tech driven. So the scientists behind AIs are the engineers and the data scientists who are really mining that data and putting it all together and coding for it. So that's a whole new different field of science that's all tech driven. That's super interesting. So I think those scientists can be doing a lot more about more that accessibility and transparency of where they're getting that sourcing from, if they're using all sources or certain political or professional websites to get it from, or like scientific research. And even going back to my first point, like most consumers are being lied to in the media and by business leaders. I think it was about 64% of journalists and 61% of business leaders. So I think it's really interesting. I think scientists and the people who are really like not just representing the company but are really working within the company can like kind of do the opposite of a whistleblowing effect, but rather go and advocate for the brand and advocate for what they're doing. So I think AI, in the article put it perfectly, the scientists can explain the research, engage in dialogue, and harness peer voices as advocates. I think when they do that, that could really bring AI. And I think especially in the education sphere, one thing that can be really done is AI being more used as a tool and not a punishment. For example, whenever I'm submitting papers or academic findings or research or whatever, I can completely write my own source. I can completely write my own stuff and cite my sources correctly, and then it'll still say it's AI generated, which can be really frustrating at times. So I think if teachers kind of worked with us a little more about like introducing AI to the classroom sphere as a tool and not something to stay away from, that would be really interesting and like knowing how to do. And then just in my personal opinion about AI, I think AI is not going anywhere, especially now it's been founded. But I think we can all collectively, both as consumers and also as brand representatives, do more to not only like fear people, like stray people away from AI, but bring them together. I think when we polarize it, that's where the issue really becomes. So anyway, I really enjoyed this assignment. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great day.